Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into an important and developing situation that's shaping the battlefield and influencing the strategic direction of the war. Russia's Southern Army Group facing growing isolation. This issue has become one of the most significant undercurrents in the conflict, not only because of what it means for Russia's immediate military performance, but also because of the long-term consequences it may have on the balance of power, territorial control, and political narratives surrounding the war. In this video script, we'll unpack everything step by step, explaining how the situation developed, why the southern grouping is becoming increasingly isolated, and what impact this could have on the broader conflict. As always, the paragraphs will be short, direct, and easy to follow. The first thing to understand is why the Southern Army Group matters. Among all of Russia's deployed formations, the Southern contingent carries some of the most important responsibilities. It oversees operations in areas like southern Donetsk, occupied parts of Zaporizhia, and the vital land corridor stretching toward Crimea. It is also crucial in defending the approaches to the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow sees as one of its most sensitive and strategically valuable holdings. When such a force begins to face pressure, limitations, or isolation, the entire flow of military operations can shift dramatically. For months, analysts and observers on both sides have noted that this grouping of forces has been struggling with a growing mix of logistical strain, battlefield setbacks, command instability, and strategic overextension. Individually, each of these problems would be difficult but manageable. Together, they create a cascading effect where every issue amplifies the next, ultimately putting the entire formation under stress. One of the clearest early signs of trouble was the leadership shakeup that occurred when the commander of the Southern Army Group was removed from his position. This wasn't portrayed publicly as a crisis by Russian authorities, who described it as a planned rotation. However, insiders, military bloggers, and analysts suggested a very different story. The commander's removal appeared to be tied to allegations that he had submitted misleading or overly optimistic battlefield reports. These reports supposedly painted a picture of progress that didn't match reality. This kind of situation points to a significant breakdown in communication and trust within the command structure. When a commander feels pressure to exaggerate results or obscure difficulties, it usually means the leadership environment is tense, politically charged, or unable to tolerate setbacks. In war, accurate information is critical. Once misinformation starts to circulate within the chain of command, decisions become distorted. Troops on the ground may be pushed into operations that are unrealistic or poorly timed, and resources may be allocated based on faulty assumptions. At the same time, Russian forces in the south have been struggling with constant logistical challenges. Supplies have to travel long distances, often through contested or exposed areas. Ukrainian strikes on bridges, depots, and transport routes have frequently disrupted the flow of ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements. In modern warfare, logistics is not merely about transport. It's the bloodstream of the entire army. Every shell fired, every vehicle moved, and every soldier deployed depends on consistent resupply. When that system becomes strained, the ability to maintain offensives collapses. This dynamic is part of what makes the Southern Front so difficult for Russia right now. The troops stationed there aren't only fighting forward into contested territory. They are also responsible for holding large defensive stretches and maintaining rear area security. This double burden increases the stress on their supply lines. When logistics fail to keep pace, units become exhausted, equipment becomes damaged beyond repair, and offensive operations become increasingly impossible to maintain. In addition to logistics and leadership issues, there is the problem of overextension. Russia's southern territory demands large numbers of troops to maintain control. The front lines are long, the terrain is challenging, and Ukrainian forces have repeatedly shown the ability to strike deep behind the lines when the opportunity arises. This places constant pressure on Russian planners to allocate more troops than they ideally want to send. The reality, however, is that Russia's military isn't bottomless. Even with mobilization efforts, voluntary recruitment pushes, and incentives aimed at drawing in more fighters, there is a limit to how many trained, equipped, and battle-ready personnel Russia can field. This puts natural constraints on how many reinforcements can be sent to the southern grouping, even as the demands there continue to rise. Another factor that is contributing to the sense of isolation around the Southern Army Group is the broader political and informational environment. In warfare, information is a battlefield of its own. Russia's leadership is heavily invested in projecting the image of strength, success, and steady progress. Any major admission of failure, vulnerability, or collapse could have consequences both domestically and internationally. This creates pressure to avoid acknowledging problems until they become too large to hide. When a military force is under strain but cannot openly communicate its challenges, it becomes harder to request support in time, harder to prepare realistic contingency plans, and harder to adjust strategy in a timely manner. This creates a situation where the southern grouping may be operating under constraints that are not fully acknowledged within the higher command. This pressure also affects morale. Soldiers who sense that their leaders are not being honest with them or with the public can become demoralized. Troops who feel isolated, undersupplied, or misled may lose confidence in their commanders, which further damages unit cohesion. And when morale declines, performance naturally suffers. On the Ukrainian side, the situation offers opportunities. Ukrainian forces have made targeting supply routes, command nodes, and rear area infrastructure a central part of their strategy. The more isolated the Russian southern units become, the better positioned Ukraine is to exploit vulnerabilities. The aim is not necessarily to break the formation outright, but to incrementally weaken it until it becomes unable to perform its duties effectively. If this process continues, Russia may find itself forced into increasingly defensive operations in the south. That would stand in stark contrast to its earlier ambitions, which included cutting deeper into Ukrainian territory, securing major cities, and solidifying control over the land bridge to Crimea. Instead of advancing, the focus may shift to simply maintaining what they already hold and preventing further erosion of their position. The wider implication of this shift is that Russia's southern strategy could be undermined at its core. If the Southern Army Group becomes too isolated to function effectively, Moscow may be forced to divert reinforcements from other sectors of the front. That could weaken offensive operations elsewhere or even expose other areas to Ukrainian counterattacks. Strategically, this creates a dangerous cycle for Russia. The more it tries to reinforce its isolated units, the more pressure it places on other parts of its military. The more it spreads its forces thinly, the greater the risk of collapse or breakthrough in unexpected areas. For Ukraine, this dynamic provides an opportunity to shape the battlefield over the long term, even without major sweeping offensives. Additionally, the psychological dimension of isolation matters. When a force knows it is under pressure, short on supplies, and subject to leadership instability, its combat effectiveness declines even before physical conditions worsen. The knowledge that reinforcements are limited or delayed contributes to the sense of vulnerability. The belief that the chain of command is disorganized or unreliable erodes confidence. These factors affect decision making on the ground, leading either to overly cautious behavior or to desperate, high-risk maneuvers that can worsen the situation. Looking ahead, the situation surrounding Russia's Southern Army Group will remain one of the key storylines shaping the war's next phase. Whether this isolation becomes a temporary difficulty or evolves into a deeper strategic problem will depend on a combination of Russian adaptability and Ukrainian pressure. Reinforcing the southern front will require significant resources, careful planning, and honest communication within Russia's military hierarchy. If those elements fail to align, the difficulties may continue to intensify. For Ukraine, the opportunity will lie in maintaining pressure without overextending its own forces. The goal is not only to disrupt Russian operations, but also to ensure that Ukraine retains the capacity to exploit any breakthroughs that occur. This requires patience, coordination, and sustained international support. In closing, the isolation of Russia's Southern Army Group represents a pivotal moment in the war. It highlights the challenges of sustaining long-term operations, the importance of honest leadership, and the limits of military manpower and logistics. As pressure grows, Moscow will have to make difficult decisions, whether to reinforce, rotate, restructure, or even scale back its ambitions in the region. Each choice comes with risks, and each will shape the direction of the conflict. Thanks for watching. If you found this script detailed and helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think Russia's next move might be, and whether the situation in the south could mark a turning point in the war.